There's been some great trips this summer. Today, this is the final destination. Ruby Falls Trail, Central Alberta, south of Hinton, probably about 100 kilometers. As always, my normal caveats apply. I do like to provide a little bit of context, so I show a little bit of the trail in, but this one's going to start a little bit differently because we're going to jump right into the first river crossing. There's two ways to get into this place. There's a north trail right here that's a little bit longer, a little bit deeper, but shorter, and a south trail. And you're going to figure out why we did both here in a second. Now, I'd like to provide an excuse here before what you see. I misread this a little bit, and the result is that my bike got swamped. So that wasn't a great start. This literally was our first river crossing of the day, what turned out to be probably 20 to 30 river crossings, so it's not confidence inspiring. Here's Jarrett making sure that lesson stayed, and making sure that he shows me his video of me going into the water. Thankfully, he did jump in right away to give me a hand with the bike. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt to get back out, but we got her out, and after about 20 minutes, we got it all started back up again, and no harm, no foul. I'd like to say within that we ride a huge variety of terrain, ranging from pretty high altitude rocky material, as you saw in the last video there up at Catamount Mountain. We do a little bit of swamping, although I try to avoid that. I don't like ripping up the ground. It just makes such a mess of the bike. We ride a ton of sand, some forest trails, some mountain trails, and this is probably some of the terrain that we do the least of, which is kind of low valley but high altitude mountain. I seriously misread how to do the rivers here. I'd done a few crossings here and there, particularly out in the Ghost area near Calgary. It seems like the rocks were a little more embedded there. Here, I think it might be because of how many 4x4s go through the area, but the river rock were large, probably about 4 to 8 inches in diameter, and they were significantly loose. And when I went in there, I went in too slow, and it dug out. My front end pushed in a little bit, and I started to sink, and I went to go put my legs down, and my freakishly short legs with my 27-inch inseam and a tall bike that has a 36.5-inch seat didn't allow me to put my foot down. I put my foot in the water, and it just sunk down into the rock, so I had nothing to hold me up. And what you were watching there a few seconds ago was the inlet trail before we get to the river. There's about 15, 18 kilometer stretch going in. Here you see James scouting the river, which seems like maybe a little bit more reasonable than our first approach of just dive in. We didn't really significantly swamp the rest of the day, although we did kind of half tip over, got stuck in the rocks a few times. But as the day went on, we started to carry a little bit more speed. You can see the rock here. This is pretty indicative of what the river is like beneath. We're later in the season here, so the river level's down quite a bit, but this whole basin obviously floods out early on in the year with the mountain runoff. But it's pretty bumpy and just honestly really loose. I don't know the exact reason. I'm not a geologist or a trailologist, but you get bounced around a lot. But like I said, as we went through the day, we started to carry a little bit more speed, even though that's a double-edged sword, and it seemed to work significantly better. I'd like to throw in a clarification to that. The first probably 8 to 10 kilometers of the trail is the swamp section there from the south, but after that you've got probably 15 to 18 kilometers. I think it ended up being 31 kilometers total, 29 or 31 kilometers from where you hit the riverbed until you get to the Ruby Falls campground, which turned out to be quite a little gem for being quite a ways out. I guess I both feel sorry for and both a little jealous as well for the park ranger that has to deal with that. I think it'd be a pretty cool job to come out here and clean up the campsite and get paid to do that. Now, it'll become self-evident here in a minute, but the scenery got better and better as we went. I was having a pretty rough day, to say the least. Now, I had 4 major problems on this trip. This part of the video here is only one day of it because I'm trying to cut out more of the transitory stuff because it shows up in a lot of my other videos. But I really missed out on an opportunity, and admittedly I was a little bit grumpy on this day. I had a few new pieces of gear with me that failed ultimately. I had old gear that failed, and then I swamped my bike. Obviously, you've seen already that my bike went underwater. We had a little bit of a problem getting it starting because I did take a little bit of water into the airbox, but thankfully none of it got into the engine. But we fought a little bit with that getting going. But that came after already having my armored pants fail, literally leaving the driveway for the trip. It's a longer story, but ultimately honestly, it was probably a few hours into the trip. Basically, my one leg was entirely exposed and the other one was still zipped up. The zipper had ripped out from the pants, so I couldn't zip up the one side, so that wasn't great. Secondly, is that I had bought a new tent that was a little more savvy for my bike, packed down a lot smaller. I hadn't tried it yet, so I was pretty excited about it. But when I set it up, it was one of the worst constructed tents I have ever seen. I don't know if it was just my addition or whether they had just failed on the construction for mine, but the areas where they welded the seams together, it looks like it had burnt through the material. So it was basically every seam was going to fail on it in very short order. So that was pretty frustrating because it wasn't exactly a cheap tent. And really, the last item, or the last major item here, was a bit of a tie with my pants as far as total irritation. But I just bought a brand new Giant Loop Great Basin, and I had it strapped down to the back of the bike. And I thought I had done a reasonably good job with the strapping, but when we were going down a hill out of Whitehorse Provincial Park here, it was pretty bouncy, but my gear shifted and it sucked one of the legs of the brand new luggage into the wheel, and it tore out the bottom of it. I think it's repairable. I haven't taken it in yet. I mean, ultimately anything's repairable if you throw enough money at it, but my luggage literally got used for about 36 hours before it needs a major repair, and thankfully Jarrett's got some decent knot skills, so he was able to make a little bit of a catch for it, and it lasted the rest of the weekend. But admittedly, through all of these frustrations, it got under my skin a significant amount. Now thankfully the two guys I'm riding here with, my son James and a friend Jarrett, they were both pretty understanding. I think they both understood that I was in a pretty sour mood, and I was pretty worried about my gear, and my bike was running a little bit rough for a little while. But it's a good reminder that adventure riding sometimes is an adventure. You see the footage here and the scenery, and on the day we're riding in here, I have a little bit of footage from the way back, but I was admittedly in a pretty sour mood, and it was a waste. I really needed to relax a little bit more and take a deep breath. If there wasn't risk involved in this, it wouldn't be fun, and that's the bottom line. It doesn't need to be wildly dangerous, but adventure should always be bookended by not knowing whether your story ends well or it ends poorly. That is the adventure part of adventure biking, and so it was a lesson learned, a little bit humbling, I guess, because I try not to let things get under my skin like that, but admittedly on this day it did, and it just, I had a good time. It was beautiful in that area, but it wasn't until we got at the falls and got to relax a little bit that I really started to enjoy myself again. And with that, I throw in a shameless plug where if any of you guys know a guy that repairs Giant Loop luggage, could seriously use a guy right now. I need to get it repaired before the next trip. Now, returning to the trip itself, the Ruby Falls Trail, man, 2 big thumbs up. Even grumpy with all my gear falling apart and just sour on sour, it was just a beautiful trip. Be prepared for a lot of river crossings. I would not recommend it early in the year, even later in the year. Nothing got super deep, but like I said, the rock beds in there, I think they do get chewed up by the trucks quite a lot, and it is pretty loose, so be prepared to pick your bike up. Be prepared to get a little, I would say a lot wet. There is no way that you're going to get there with dry feet. Accept it, roll with it. It just gets a lot easier after that, but it got a little gross on the way back because we still had another full day. We rode a fairly significant amount of miles the next day, and we were pretty thoroughly soaked. Nothing had really dried out at all. But, you know, when we were turned around, it seemed a lot better on the way out. Part of that's because my sour attitude wasn't dragging us down, but I think also is that we just kind of come to grips with what it was and refined our technique a little bit. The scenery here, oh man, 10 out of 10. Seriously, one of the most beautiful spots I've seen in the mountains. We're coming up to the campground, which is very unique in its own right. I know it sounds like a funny thing, but the first time I'd ever seen these throne-style outhouses was here. I didn't take a picture of it, probably should have, but just a little green throne, literally no roof, anything. So it's kind of a neat outhouse, although I'd imagine it would be a unique experience if it was pouring rain trying to use it. But other than that, it obviously smelt way better than a normal one, and it was seriously great that the province has taken the time and the money and the resources to put it out here. It does make the experience a little bit nicer and obviously cleaner at the campground. We are camping right underneath that mountain ahead of us. We're crossing over the river here to get to the campground. Wow, campground. It's an area where you can camp. There's no slots or anything like that, and it's right at the falls that are at the beginning of the video. It's about 50, 60 yards. I have some phenomenal pictures, if I do say so myself, of the falls. I'll try to throw them up at the end of the video just as a still capture, but you would be hard-pressed to find a place more impressive. It's not the biggest place in the world, but it's certainly not small, and you couldn't design a better waterfall if you started with a blank slate. Just absolutely beautiful, and just clear on clear water. Now, I included a little bit of footage here leaving our campsite in the morning. It is pretty indicative of also the change in attitude as we were coming in there. We had been riding pretty long into the night, or into the day, so it's starting to get dark, and here we are, and it's much sunnier. My attitude's better. There was significantly less bad language on the way out. I think we all had a much better time, although I don't know what the other two are thinking, but I would like to come back here. I think new perspective, a little better idea of what to expect. It's not that any of this was particularly difficult. There was a lot of water crossings, which is good and bad. I don't mind doing them, but it is a little bit harder on your bike. But I just love the experience camping out there. It was serene, having the waterfall sound in the background, and we were right up against the river, so I'd really love to repeat. But I'm not sure if I'll be going solo or not. So here we are at the end. I'll throw up a couple of pictures that I thought were particularly beautiful from the trip, but thanks for coming along, and we still have a couple more videos for this year.